Battlestar Galactica, a game that is a very social experience, made some people that didn't even know about the show to look for it after playing it, and then they realized, okay, they had spoilers, but after playing the game, but oh my goodness, this is such a nice piece of art about the series after being playing your game. So my goodness, what responsibility you and so there are many interesting aspects in Battlestar Galactica, right? The skill check, the agenda deck, the alpha player was taken to a different level. The paranoia aspect very well introduced in that game, just like in the series. How did you capture the essence of the show so well? Are you a fan of the series?
Oh yeah, I was a huge fan of the series, and when we got the license to it, I was ecstatic that I got to be the one to work on it. I think deconstructing the game, there were a couple of things that we did to try to make it feel like the show. I mean, first off, there were the characters. Like, it's very important that these characters feel like the characters from the show. And so we captured the things that the characters were good at, but also the things that they were bad at, because the show is very much about these flawed human beings, and that felt important. In addition to that, I think that there was a lot of the design came from figuring out ways to make people distrust each other, all right? Figuring out ways to put a target on somebody's back and have a reason to maybe doubt that their intentions are the best. And so that is where the skill checks came from, right? That's like, you're playing cards face down. We're not exactly sure who's playing what. And that was very important way to be able to deduce a little bit what people were up to, but also you have the random cards that get thrown in there. And I've had like cards come out of that and suddenly people start yelling at each other, but nobody even played any bad cards. They're just blaming each other for it. There's also the titles in the game. Like, you've got the admiral who's got the important decision of where we travel to. And a lot of the locations that you can travel to, a lot of them are really bad. And you're forced to pick one of these. And so you pick one, you play it, and suddenly everyone looks at you like, why'd you choose to go there? That's terrible. And the admiral's always like, it's not my fault, I got terrible cards. But that might be true, or maybe it's not true. And so all of the mechanics really came from that point of just, let's give people reasons to not believe each other, and and force people to make decisions, like the crisis cards that say the admiral has to choose, does this terrible thing happen or does this terrible thing happen? It's another situation where, you know, the admiral's in a terrible position. Whatever they choose, everyone's going to hate them. But they have to make a choice. And so that's where a lot of that came from.
Great. As I said earlier, you are a guy who best blends intellectual property and gaming. How was it to work with such a brand as Warhammer? You took Space Hulk, that is a very famous board game that has lots of miniatures, and transformed it in a card game that translates greatly the same experience without the need of painting lots of miniatures. How do you do it?
Yeah, I mean, that was a tricky one. It took a lot of revisions to kind of get where it was. I remember early versions of the game were nowhere near as much fun. I can't remember who came up with the different mechanics and the idea that like you were a row of characters going down a hallway, because there were so many people involved, right? And it was so long ago too. I do remember that Space Hulk was one of those aspirational type games that I always wanted to get when I was younger, but I never got. Like, I remember seeing it in, I think it was like Games Magazine. They had an ad for it in the back. I'm like, oh, this looks awesome. This was after I'd played Hero Quest and I was ready for something a little more crunchy. but I couldn't find it anywhere. Like I was just a kid at the time, but it looked so cool. And then when I got older and I was able to play it, and we got the Games Workshop license, and Christian asked the question, could we make a Space Hulk card game? What would that look like? And we're just have brainstorming sessions and talk about it, and then we're of course talk to Games Workshop and tell them our ideas. And I mean, they're great to work with. Like all of the licensors I've worked with, they're always very passionate about their property. They know it better than anybody else, and they're there to protect it and there to help you make the best game possible. And so, I mean, working with them was great, and I'm glad that people are still playing it all these years later.
Indeed, yeah, because at that time, okay, let's see this game. Okay, Konieczka. Okay, it's a buy. Must buy. So that's what's the thing. Konieczka on the cover. Okay, I buy it. That's it. It's true. Run Wars. Okay, it's a huge box. And yeah, I have a question for you. Run Wars is one of the most beloved games. Do you think this one is like a TI in a fantasy world, or?
Yeah, so the Rune Wars board game, not to be confused with the miniatures game that we made later, it was originally going to be called Battle Mist 2nd Edition. Battle Mist was a game that Christian Peterson made, which was the fantasy version of Twilight Imperium. And we were starting work on it, and the game Battle Lore was announced by a completely different company, Days of Wonder. We're like, oh, Battle Lore? We can't make a Battle Mist game. That's going to be way too confusing. And so we came up with the name Rune Wars. I think that was Chris that came up with it. And the goal with that game was to be a spiritual successor to Battle Mist. I mean, the original Battle Mist was very dated at the time, and so I basically had the idea of what that game was, and then was coming up with fresh mechanics for it. And so I knew I wanted it to be basically fantasy Twilight Imperium. I knew I wanted the units to feel different. I didn't want a dice-based combat system. We also wanted an important element from Battle Mist. We wanted the heroes to be able to go on quests as you're going around doing battles. And so there were a lot of elements in that game. One of the biggest rule books I've probably ever written. It's got a lot going on, and I think I'll probably never design a game of that size again. Maybe? I don't know. It was a lot.